So why do you think most startups actually fail?
There are 9 reasons. First of all, a lack of product market fit. Second, they run out of money mismanagement. They have no clear business model. That's the third one. The fourth one, they neglect marketing and sales, or marketing and sales is simply not good enough. The fifth one.
Welcome to today's episode of How Startups Grow. With this podcast, we help founders launch and run a successful startup by giving them actionable insights that help them succeed. This podcast is brought to you by Performato, the startup marketing agency. This is How Startups Grow.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of How Startups Grow. Today we're going into a fundamental topic, something very important if you're starting a startup. We're going to look at the 9 reasons why startups fail. Instead of looking at how we grow, we're going to look how we fail so we can learn from that. So I'm here again today with Dennis. Dennis hosting the podcast, asking me questions, having conversations with me. Good to have you again. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Let's take it away.
So why do you think most startups actually fail?
There are 9 reasons, and we're going to go deeper into them, just listing them. First of all, a lack of product market fit. Second of all, they run out of money mismanagement, for example. It's a problem. They have no clear business model. That's the third one. So they can't monetize their business. The fourth one, they neglect marketing and sales, or marketing and sales is simply not good enough. The fifth one, they don't have the right team in place to actually get things done and scale the company. Sixth one, they don't adapt to changes in the world. Let's say AI is introduced, you need to do something with that as a company. If you fail to do that, you fail to adapt. 7, you scale before you're ready to scale. Number 8, there's a lack of focus, so you're doing everything at once instead of doing the one things you do really well. And ninth of all, the founder simply has to quit because of internal reasons or external reasons.
So if founders would just not do these 9 things, they will succeed.
That's pretty much the thing.
It's a short podcast episode then.
Do not do these 9 and you're done.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but then it's still pretty hard to get into when executing, actually.
I think we should give some more context. So before we dive into all of those reasons, are these also connected to each other, or are they all separate?
Some things are connected to each other. So, for example, the second one I mentioned, running out of money. Technically, all startups die when they run out of money. But then the question is, why do they run out of money? Is it because of bad product market fit, a bad team failing to execute, not enough customers, or simply money mismanagement? So there are many reasons to these things. Some product market fits are a bit weaker. It's not a yes or a no. It's a yes or a no or anything in between, basically. So some of these do have some additional context to it. But other than that, I think these 9, they stand alone from each other. You can usually pinpoint at least one of these to the failure of a startup.
So is one of them more important than the other, or they are all also the same?
So the thing that happens most is the lack of product market fit. So in fact, 42% of the startups fail because of a lack of product market fit. That's the largest percentage out of the reasons why the startups actually fail. So that means that most people do this wrong. Now, the other ones, they're still important. Only this one, it's most likely to happen if there is a reason for failure.
So product market fit is the thing that companies should focus on first?
Yes. So product market fit basically means, does your product fit the market? Or does the market actually want your product? Now, a strong product market fit means that people will buy your product and they will keep using your product. Now, if they don't buy your product, you're not going to get any revenue. If they don't keep using your product, you're not going to get any revenue in the long term either. So that's why it's crucial. If these are not done correctly, you will not be able to sell anything.
Yeah. And I think this also comes down to the episode we did before about customer development. This is also very important for the product market fit, right?
Yeah, exactly. So product market fit, it's not something that's random. You can actually coordinate the process of getting there. We talked quite a lot about that in our last 2 episodes about customer development model.
Yeah.
Now, product market fit, that's something that's inherent to your product and the chosen market, which means you need to choose those correctly. But it also means that these 2, you do them correctly in the beginning, it's going to save you so much hassle, so much time, so much money in the future.
So this is almost like the foundation for the other reasons to fail. If your product market fit is not correct, you will probably eventually also run out of cash, or your team is not right.
Almost, but not always. So you can have a very strong product market fit, but if you don't do sales and marketing correctly, nobody's going to know about your product in the market anyway. If your product market fit is great, but you hire a head of finance that steals from you or whatever, or someone that doesn't fit the culture, or a head of product that's not able to build the product you want to build, that could also be a problem there. So there are many reasons as well, but I think lack of product market fit, if that is done correctly, it makes building the startup so much easier.
I understand. What are some key elements for getting a good product market fit as a startup?
So a good product market fit starts with the initial idea you have as a startup. You have to identify your audience, you have to figure out their problems, and you have to figure out a solution for that. Once you have those three in place and you validated that they're true, you can build your product and you can launch your product onto the market. In this go-to-market, you will find out if your product actually resonates with a larger market as well, or if you need to make changes again in either your product, your messaging, or how you go about it in general. If that is done correctly, then you have a strong product market fit.
All right. I think for further clarification, we could also add a link to the previous episode because we go more into detail about product market fit and customer development, right?
Yeah, we talked about this subject for, I think, an hour. So if you want to go deep into this and avoid all the pitfalls and figure out how it actually works, do check out the last 2 episodes of this podcast.
Perfect. So the second one is running out of cash. Why do you think startups run out of money?
There are several reasons. One is where if your product market fit is not good, let's go first into that one. If your product market fit is not good, then you will not be able to make a lot of sales. And if you're not able to make a lot of sales, your money will simply run out at a certain. And the solution for that is finding investors or spending less money or doing more sales. There has to be something in those 3 areas. That's one of the reasons. The other one is if you are an investor-backed startup, then you're always working with a runway, which basically means when will you run out of money? And if your runway is, let's say, 6 months, and you're going to run out of money and you still didn't start looking for investors, then you might get into problems down the line after those 6 months because your money will simply be out. So it's about the timing of money coming in, it's about the amount of money coming in, and it's also about spending money. Because if you spend too much, you can also run into this problem.
Yeah, I understand. So it's partially about calculations and partially about investing in the wrong stuff then.
Yeah. And I think, so there's the statistic here is that 29% of the startups fail because of this problem, running out of money. But if you're critical, you can say that all startups fail because of this problem. Because in the end, when does a startup end? Usually when there's no more money, or the alternative, when the founder simply stops the company.
Yeah, eventually that is when you actually stop, when the cash runs out. Maybe the last example that you gave, the reason number 9, is like more personal reasons. That's maybe the exception, but for the other ones, eventually it's the cash that stops you.
Yeah, exactly.
Why is having a clear business model important for a startup?
Yeah, so the business model comes down to how you monetize and execute your company, basically. And let's start with monetization. If you have a product that everybody wants and everybody wants to use, but you don't have a way of making money through it, then your business is going to fail in the end anyway, because there's no way of earning back what you put in. Now, the other reason is if you're unable to deliver your product consistently, that's also a business model failure, where it's more about the delivery, which could be in software, it could be in e-commerce, it could be everything. So those are the 2 reasons that are primary, I think, to the business model not being clear. Another thing is that a clear business model also helps you focus. And focus is also one of the other reasons why startups fail, so we get more into that later. But the business model, it's quite important so that you can know exactly how you're going to execute and how you're going to make money.
If you say clear business model, do you mean specifically business model for the founder? It's not clear for the founder itself, it's not clear for the business, or it's not clear for the customers who are potentially buying it?
No, it's internal. It's not about the customers. This one is mainly about the founder might have it in his head or her head and doesn't communicate it to the company. That could be a thing. It could also be that there is simply no clear business model. You see this sometimes with the inventor type of entrepreneurs that just have an idea for a cool product, but they don't think about monetizing it. So those are pretty much the reasons why this happens. This happens on the founder level or on the company level itself.
If a startup doesn't have a clear business model, what happens internally in the startup?
So I will define a business model in the financial terms right now, which is the easiest way. If you have the business model canvas, there are the bottom 2 sections in there, which are the cost structure and the revenue model. Now, if the revenue model specifically is not worked out correctly for the company, then the people inside the company will not know how to deliver value and how to extract value from their product market fit. And if this is the case, that basically means that it feels that the company is not really headed anywhere. So there's no clear path to actual success that's clearly defined.
You talk about cost structure and revenue model, so it's basically only about money, or am I missing something?
No, it's not only about the money. Okay. So in that business model canvas, you have the value proposition in the center, which is more about the product market fit. Then you also have the channels in which you reach your customers and the delivery method of reaching your customers. You have your customer segments themselves. You have partners that you're dependent on. You have key suppliers that you have. And then there's also the cost. And I'm forgetting just one of these right now, but it's also on the left side, on the cost and delivery side. So it comes down to everything you need to execute your value proposition, basically.
What would a startup have to do to have a clear business model for themselves, but also for their team?
So they should be the same business model because it's built for the business and not for individuals. And I think with this, it's up to the founders or the management team to decide how the business model looks, define how the business model looks. Defining that is easiest with tools to help you, such as the business model canvas. I would actually recommend doing that one primarily. And that is going to help you communicate it to the team as well, because the team needs to be able to understand how the business actually works. So the founding team, the management should do the hard stuff of defining it and then write it down so that the team can understand it and know what they're working with.
So everybody knows what the business model is, the team, but also the founders, and they are all moving towards a goal that is realistic. Also,
yes,
money-wise, yeah.
Yes, and this can also help you prioritize, because if your business model is dependent on certain things, then you know to put priority behind that.
So the next reason is neglecting marketing and sales. So why is it important for startups to really spend enough time on their marketing and sales?
Yeah. So one of the most common tech startups structures is a team in which the founding team are people that are product people. They're coders, they're into product, they're into design. Usually it's one of those. Now, sometimes there's a salesperson there who doesn't do marketing. Sometimes there's a marketing person there who doesn't do sales. Very rare to find a mix of those two. Now, what happens then is that these teams become inventors and they want to build cool and amazing stuff. But just building cool and amazing stuff doesn't mean you're going to get it out there. Even if there is a product market fit, you still need the distribution channels. And that's marketing and sales for a tech startup. Now, if you neglect those two, you will simply not be able to deliver your value proposition to your customers.
What advice would you give startups in terms of their marketing and sales?
The simple thing would be not to neglect marketing and sales, but I guess it's not that simple. It takes a bit of... It's similar to the next reason why they fail, but if you don't have these skills yourself, you need to hire the right person to do this for you. And the right person could be a person. It could also be an agency that you hire to do this for you. Especially on the marketing point of view, I would recommend something like that. So don't believe just because you build a good product, people are going to come to you. It simply doesn't work that way. They still need to know you exist. And that's what marketing and sales are also used for.
I can also imagine that a startup doesn't have the finances to start working with someone, like to hire someone in marketing. What is your suggestion for that person?
If you can't hire someone, I would actually work with freelancers or an agency. And an agency might be hard because that's also expensive, but then at least you get all the skill sets you need if you find the right agency. So you don't have just one person that is really good at content. You have a team of people where content and advertising and brand and everything is in one house, basically. The other option is to find a freelancer, but freelancers can also be quite expensive. And there you have the limited skill set of one person or a few people again, if you have multiple freelancers.
There are so many agencies out there who are trying to find new clients that I think it's also easy to speak with, let's say 5 or maybe even 10 agencies before you make the decision to actually start working with one of them. And in the end, you will know for sure if this agency fits your company and will get you the benefits that you actually are looking for.
Yeah, you can do that for sure. And there are also agencies, if you have no money at all, I know there are also agencies that work based on equity. So if you're a very early stage startup, you pay them a small amount and they take some equity as well, but they give you way more than you would get otherwise.
Yeah, totally agree. If you work with an agency that's based on equity, I'm thinking like a commission based, they also have some more skin in the game.
Exactly, because if you have a stake in the company, then yeah, you want that company to succeed. That helps.
So we've talked a little bit about the marketing perspective, but one of the reasons to fail is also because of a sales team. Can you give some advice there?
So if you can't execute on the sales, that's more a little different. So marketing is basically more about reaching the right people. Sales is more about convincing them to actually buy your product. Now, if you neglect the sales, that would mean that you don't know how to sell to people. And I think every founder should be able to know how to sell to people. I think that's a crucial part of the skill set of a founder, actually. So as a founder, if you don't spend time trying to sell to your customers, you will also later on not be able to teach other people of your company how to sell to customers, which means everybody has to figure it out themselves. So you fail in the short term by not getting the customers. And in the long term, you're also not setting yourself up for success because you cannot train anyone because you don't have a model for sales.
If I hear you correctly, every founder should be able to do their marketing and sales themselves?
It depends on what you believe the skill requirements are for founders. And I think every founder should know sales, but I don't think every founder should know marketing. You should know something about marketing, but I don't think you should be good at marketing. You don't have to be good at marketing, let's say it like that, if you're a founder. And that's why I would do it differently in this case. Now, if you start getting some money into the company, don't put all of that money towards your product, but do put some towards sales as well. And then you do start hiring. But it's really up to the stage that you're at as a company.
Would you suggest a startup founder to first invest in a marketing team or to hire someone in marketing or in sales?
I would usually say that you have to do both. But if I would have to pick one, I would actually pick sales first. But sales from your own point of view, from your own skill set as a founder.
So one of the reasons startups fail is that they are not hiring the right people. How does hiring the right people help startups succeed?
Yeah, so for that, I'm going to reverse the question because it's easier. If you hire the wrong people for a startup, you're not going to have the right executional skills to deliver your business model. And not having the right executional skills could mean that you're not building the product you set out to build or not in the quality that you want it. It could mean that your marketing is not good enough. It could mean that your sales is not good enough. It could mean that your leadership team is not good enough. And that's on the skills level. There's also the culture level. If you're hiring the culturally wrong people, then you're going to get a lot of conflict within the organization in terms of directions, where you need to go and how you're going to get there. You need to find the right people in terms of culture and skill set.
So how do you actually acquire those two things?
Yeah, the skill set, it's not too hard to look at. So if you're building a startup, I would first and foremost look at people who have done something similar in the past. Now, let's say in the example here, you're hiring a CMO or a VP of marketing. Now, if you're hiring a VP of marketing for a startup, it would make sense to hire a VP of marketing that has been in a startup before and has done marketing in that startup. Doesn't have to be a VP, it could be a level below, it could be a VP, but that's what you want to aim for. Someone who's done that before, who has shown that they have the skills and are now looking for doing it again at a higher level, at a different level.
Okay. And as a startup, you basically start by yourself. So what would be the first hire in your company?
It's a really good question. It's a really good question because the first hire is dependent on what you need to do. So let's say you're a founder and you have a co-founder and you're product people. So you're building a product and you love doing that. Your first hire should not be a developer. Even though you do it yourself, your first hire should be someone who's able to sell it. Someone with marketing experience or sales experience that's able to actually get people interested and wanting to buy it. If it's the other way around, if you have a product idea but you can't build it, then of course you need to hire a developer to actually build the product. So it's very dependent on your skill set, but this is how I would approach it.
Yeah, so basically look what the things that you are least good at. I think that's maybe the best way to describe it. You'll hire that first. And the things that you are able to do yourself. And I think at a later stage, maybe it's more important to also hire people for stuff that you are actually able to do. So you can focus on one priority. First, really find the people that can do the stuff that you can do that well yourself.
That's exactly right. I think there's one fundamental truth in hiring as a founder. And that is that you hire to delegate. And hiring to delegate means that you first delegate the things that you're bad at. That's simply not in your skill set. And once you grow as a company, you're also going to delegate the stuff that you are actually good at. Because you shouldn't be too much in execution if your company is becoming really big. This fundamental truth, if you follow it, you will always hire the right people.
So it's not always easy, of course, to acknowledge that you are bad at something. How should founders of startups effectively acknowledge that they're actually bad at something?
I think it comes, okay, so this is not very startup-ish, but this is the personal character, the personal development thing. If you're not able to say that you're bad at something, then you have a blind spot. And if you have a blind spot as a founder, that will hurt you in business. So I think as a founder, you should not only work on developing the business, you should work on developing yourself. And developing yourself, part of that is accepting that you're not perfect at everything. And if you accept that, then you can open up to yourself and find out where you're not good at and hire the right people for that.
So let's say I'm a founder and I'm okay in sales, I'm okay with marketing, and I'm also building the product myself. So it's like a almost 50-50 split in the responsibilities to grow my company. Is then there one first hire? Is then marketing or sales more important? Or
so in this example, let's say you said you're building the product yourself. So you're a company with a product. I would first handle that because the product, it's going to be fundamental to everything. If your product is terrible, but your marketing and sales is good, then you're going to get customers, but you're not going to keep customers. That is so fundamental if you're building a product company. That would be the first hire if you're not really good at that.
yeah. And how fast should companies grow and hire new people?
It's dependent on two things. One is the amount of customers you're getting, and the other one is the amount of cash you have available. So if you have a load of customers coming in, you can reinvest those profits, and you might be a bootstrapped company where you don't even need funding. Then you can hire at the pace at which you generate revenue and increase your monthly revenue. If you get an investment, you should draw up a plan beforehand which says how you're going to spend the money. Because you're going to get money, let's say you get $1 million, you have to say to the investor, this is how I'm going to spend it. So then you should hire quickly. Now, generally a bootstrapped company grows a bit slower, but is profitable from the start. And the funded company grows in sudden rapid bursts of when the money comes in, basically. That's how you decide how you're going to hire, how fast you're going to hire.
And when would you make a decision for either of those?
If you can be bootstrapped, you will see so at a few signals from the market. First of all, you will be able to generate profitable revenue, so profits at a low volume. So you don't need to have millions of users to generate that. Second of all, you're going to be able to generate enough revenue from that to hire the next people, which means that you're not so dependent on scale. Now, if you are dependent on scale, then you might need funding, because if you're profitable at 1 million users, you're probably not going to get there bootstrapped really quickly. So you would need outside funds to get there as fast as you can, because that is the breaking point where you become a profitable company.
And I can imagine that it's also important, like the speed of growth. Can stuff go wrong if a startup grows too fast or, for example, too slow?
Yeah. I think this might actually be a good bridge to the problem number 7, which is premature scaling. Why startups fail is premature scaling, which basically means the company is not ready to scale, but you do it anyway. And usually this is something that happens when you generate funding. Now, let's say your product market fit, it's there, but it's simply not strong enough. But you get funding and then you just build an entire company around that weak product market fit. You're scaling way too fast for a product that's simply not good enough. And the problems that you have as a small company will only be bigger if you're a big company. They're not going to magically fix itself. So I think that premature scaling thing, it's a significant problem why startups fail as well.
So how can startups manage their growth in a good way?
Don't overhire. That's one important thing, going back to the hiring the right people and hiring the right team. If you don't need a team of 20 salespeople, then don't hire a team of 20 salespeople. It's simple advice and it's stupid advice almost, but it's true. Now, I think a lot of the reasons why companies grow too fast, I think it's mainly because of ego. I think the founder or the management team thinks to themselves, we have this amazing company and we're only going to get bigger. And a lot of founders, they want to manage a company with 1,000 people in there because that's really cool. Just honest, if you have that on your experience list of life, managing and building a company with 1,000 people, that's really cool. But some people, because of that, rush to the point of wanting to get there. And when you rush to get there, you might get there and then you break the company itself.
I can also imagine that if you hire, what did you say, 20 salespeople at once, they're not well trained. They don't have experience with your company. You don't have one person who has more experience with your company than the other, so they can also not train each other. That could also be an issue, maybe.
Exactly, yeah. And this is a big problem. You need to train your people. And this also highlights another problem, which is apart from skills, we mentioned culture as an important thing. Now, if you manage to hire 20 salespeople all at once, they're going to be lacking in skills, but they will also probably not be as on board with the company culture as you would like. And getting them on board with the company culture, that takes time and effort, which is another reason why you shouldn't scale prematurely.
I can also imagine that it is quite hard to keep track of everything. So if you hire 20 salespeople, how are you going to know who is the problem? Instead of just hiring one or two, you can train them effectively, and then you hire another one, and you see what is the difference between their activities and their results.
Yeah, so let's talk then about delegation, because that's, like I mentioned, key as a founder. If you want to hire 20 salespeople, let's say you actually do need to hire them because you have so much demand, you have to have them. The best way to hire 20 salespeople, I think, is to hire one amazing sales leader and have them do it for you. And that way you can have the sales leader evaluate their skill set, which they're probably going to be better at than you are anyway. And with the sales leader, you can define the culture and you can work on the culture and make it a key topic for them to focus on people that would match the culture. And if they match the culture, to have them believe the culture as well, to be part of the company culture. So that's how you should handle scaling, through your leadership team. And if you skip that step, you can grow faster, but you're just going to break the company because you're not scaling with the right fundamentals in place.
So would this be like the first hire, the sales leader?
I would hire someone that would be capable of potentially becoming a sales leader. This is an important thing, actually. So your first hire, we talked about the roles, but we can also talk about their maturity in terms of skill sets with the actual job. So what you want to hire in the beginning are the people that might become leaders within your company. They don't have to be there yet. You also don't give them the leadership role yet, but they might turn into that. Now, this is going to do a few things. There's going to be room for development for that person. There is ambition. And if you can harness the ambition of your employees, you will also be able to make the work environment very interesting for them, very engaging. And then finally, when you do get to the point of hiring a leader, you might have someone there that could be suitable. Important here, don't make promises beforehand, because they still need to be the right person for the job, not just because you've worked with them for a while.
It's also way easier if you've worked with someone for a while already to evaluate if they are actually potentially a good sales leader.
Yeah, and there's also another interesting thing here. If you hire the person that is ready to become a sales leader potentially, they will still do execution in the early stages of your company. And if you hire the sales leader, that might be a person who has managed a team of 50 salespeople in the last 5 years. But the last time they did sales themselves is much longer ago. So you want people that can execute and grow into leadership roles potentially.
Ultimately, you would also not advise to hire a sales leader from outside of your company, like a very experienced sales leader. You would advise more to train someone in-house who is doing the sales part and then becomes a sales leader.
Yeah, I love training. I love training your people. You have to manage the training. So that's something you would have to do as a founder. That's like the important thing here. Keep in mind, you're training someone, you're not promising someone to become the leader. If they're not capable, then don't put them into the VP slot when you need one.
Yeah, just keep track of how they're doing and then don't tell them yet. That's the big part. Don't make promises you can't.
I think you need to be... So there's an ethical thing about this, interestingly enough. I think you want them, in a way, you want to dangle the carrot in front of them on a stick. If that makes sense, like the metaphor. Yeah. You want them to know it's possible, but you also don't want to promise them that it's going to happen. And if they know it's possible, then it's up to them to prove themselves. And not, there's a promise anyway, so you're going to get it, whatever. I think this is highly motivating for people. Some people will not resonate with this method because they will feel like played on, which is true in a way. But I think this might be a very helpful thing. This is how I would actually like to be involved as a startup, as a marketing leader, for example.
I think it's also like what you say, promising something is a lot different than explaining your whole team that there's room for growth and that you're actually looking for a sales leader in the future. And to let them know what are the qualities you are looking for. That's totally different than telling someone like, hey, if you do a good job, you will become a sales leader. That's a different carrot than the first one.
Yeah. And there's also one other thing, which is also that you're looking for, so we're going deeper into the team, which I like actually. You're looking for intrinsic motivation as well. This is something that's very important because if someone knows that they become the sales leader, if they do their job well, if they work on those qualities, they might do it because they want that role. But in the long term, you would rather have someone who does those qualities because they want to do it for themselves and not for the... Because if you want to do it for yourself, that motivation is going to last you beyond the point of where you're the sales leader. And if you do it only for the outcome, then I think it does something better to people when the motivation comes from themselves.
I think it's also easier for a startup to bring up this motivation for your team. And it gets more tricky and harder when you are an enterprise company or you have 100 people working in your company.
For sure. Yeah, when you grow past the point where as the founder, you don't even do the hires yourself anymore, that is a scary moment. Yeah. Because that culture evaluation, that is something that you have to also delegate at one point.
So we've skipped one part, that is not adapting to change. So why is it important for startups to actually adapt to change?
Yeah. So I can illustrate this through an example. Let's say I have built a data analytics platform with dashboarding where you can have like pretty graphs of all your data, stuff like that. And let's say I've launched this about 4 years ago, and in comes ChatGPT and AI, and I write it off as not being interesting at all. So we're not going to do anything with this. Now, a few years later, maybe even a few months later, because things can move quickly, my top competitors are going to launch AI features that can help you analyze your data and make sense of your data. I don't have that, but they do. Now I'm already behind them. If this technology is important, and when I'm behind them, I have to struggle to try and keep up. And it places you in a very uncomfortable position as a company where you are not the leader anymore. And not adapting to change, this is just with AI. It could be for anything, really. Anything that changes in the environment, any new technologies that come up, any political movements, anything that changes, you have to be able to adapt.
So one of the issues for startups to fail is not adapting to change. So why is it important for startups to adapt to change?
Yeah, so the world is ever changing. So as a startup, you need to join in on that. So for example, when AI goes through a revolutionary phase that it has been doing for the last few years now, as a startup, you need to think about, do I need to do something with that? Do I need to base my entire product around AI now? Do I need to simply join in, or should I ignore this one? And you have to make an evaluation to that. And the interesting thing is also that not every change in the world is there to last and is going to have significant impact. Some things may look like they will, but they don't. So as a founder, you need to have almost an instinct to find out which new developments are going to be significant for you and adapt to those immediately.
So when do you know when to adapt, and when do you know when you're potentially over adapting or changing too much?
This is a really good question that's really hard to answer, because I think this is one of those things where you cannot see into the future. So let's, for example, take cryptocurrencies. It's a little further back than AI, so I think it's a better example. So about 9 years ago, crypto was worth $500, something like that. And then it grew from 500 to 4,000 over the course of 3 months. And they said, oh, blockchain, revolution, cryptocurrency. Then a few years later, the same thing happened again. They said, again, revolution. A few years later, the same thing, again, revolution. Now, you can build an entire company on blockchain. But if you were, for example, a company like Amazon, and on the first wave of blockchain, you immediately said, oh, there's blockchain, we need to have that as a payment method. It might not have been that successful. And it might not still be that successful right now, but in the future it might be. So you need to develop an instinct as a founder. And I think this is very hard to make tangible.
So something could also be like a temporary trend, for example. So is it advised to, let's say, spend like 10% of your time on new trends, or is that not a number you can tie to it?
I like 10%. I didn't hear of it before. But yeah, in a way, you need to be risk-proofing yourself a little bit as a company. And when there's a new trend, you don't necessarily have to start building for it immediately. But it is important to start thinking about, okay, so what if this is a big thing? How would we be as a business? Be aware of that. And if it could be destroying your business completely, you need to have a plan so that if it does appear like it's becoming bigger, you can move into action immediately. If it doesn't look like it will destroy your business, then it's insignificant and you can just leave it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing. You need to have the instinct, then you need to be prepared. And then if the change happens, you need to be able to move fast.
So maybe it's also good to look at your competitors, see if they are implementing it, and to see if it's like a threat to your company.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's really interesting with this as well is that a lot of startups come from this. If there are companies that are already there for tens of years, a company that's around for 100 years, for example, they will not be as quick to adapt new technology as a startup just starting out will. Because that startup is going to be maybe making it the core of their business. So adapting to change is for safeguarding your existing business. But if you're starting a business, you can actually use it to start one that could potentially outcompete the larger company.
So we have adapting to change, but we also have lack of focus. They are opposites in my opinion. So how does a lack of focus hurt a startup?
I agree with your statement. Yeah, they're opposite. So a lack of focus for me means that almost everything is interesting and you will do something with that and that and that. Now, a lack of focus could take root in your business model. It could take root in your product where you have something called feature creep, where you just add features and features over and over. It could also have to do with where you place your focus executionally. Now, as a business, the model that you can employ to get back to the lack of focus, to make it an abundance of focus maybe, is actually very simple. There are 3 things you do as a company. 1 is you get customers, 2 is you keep customers, and 3, you build stuff that keep new customers coming in and keep your customers happy. If you do those 3 correctly, then yeah, lack of focus is never going to be a problem. But people don't work that way. People always see something shiny. The shiny object syndrome is strong in all of us.
And potentially adapting to change should always have an influence on these 3 things.
Like I mentioned, one of the most common things to see is a founder that finds everything interesting. And this, I mentioned the product just now, but this could mean everything. It could mean taking the network event, which doesn't even have any of your potential customers in there, or investors, whatever you need. It could mean doing that marketing campaign that looks fun, but is never going to give you any results anyway. It could be talking to your friends and family about something and organizing workshops and doing all sorts of things on the side that do not directly impact the business. I think that is a very common thing because most founders are actually people that like doing new things.
Yeah. So you gave a few examples of what not to do, and you gave some examples of what they should be doing. But what can they do to actually stay focused on the things that are important? So keeping customers, getting new customers.
Yeah, I think it comes down to writing down a clear vision, mission, and your path towards it. If those are clear, then you always have something to test yourself to. So if you have a clear vision and you ask yourself when you see something new, does this contribute to my vision? Yes or no? If the answer to that is yes, you can do it. If the answer is no, you cannot. Now, you also have these 3 things, of course, with the customers and everything, and you have to focus on that. But this is something that would help me myself.
Are there some common things that startups or founders of startups focus on too much that you see?
Yeah, let's name a few. So the first one I mentioned is the feature creep, where they keep growing their product, building new features that they never tested, just building onto it. Another one that you see a lot is where they think their product also works for others. So they have one product and they're like, it's for this market, but it could also be for that market. It could also be that market or that market. So you have the market creep, let's call it that. And then finally you have, I don't know if I would call it the networking creep, which is more like everything and everyone is interesting. And people are interesting, but not always in context of your business.
Yeah, so you should keep focus on your ideal customers, but also keeping them happy and getting those people in instead of trying to speak to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So then there's the last reason, and that is more a personal thing, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So there is one more reason why startups actually fail. I'm not even sure if you can call it failure, but that's simply the founder stops the business. And this could be due to a business reason where they're trying to build something. It's just simply not viable. Business model doesn't work and they don't go bankrupt, but they're like, we can't fix this, we're done. And then they might give some money back to investors or whatever. Another reason is starting a company is hard. You need to work a lot. You don't do a 40-hour work week in the beginning, especially. You have to keep working and working. And it's not just the time you put in. It's also that you're going to do a lot of things that will not work. And for almost anybody, that's going to cause stress. So some founders can't handle that level of stress when it happens, which is completely natural, completely human. So founder burnout is actually one of the reasons as well, I think.
It's quite sad, but it takes a lot of effort and time and energy to start a company.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to go into the specific reasons that cause burnout because I'm not authorized to do that, let's say it like that. But I do think one piece of advice that I have seen go wrong and go well sometimes is that if you start a business where you're completely behind the vision and really doing something because you find it important yourself, there's a much lower chance of getting this issue, I think, than when you do it simply because you want to start a business or you want to make a lot of money. I think that internal motivation, intrinsic motivation, I think that helps you combat this a bit.
But there's also the part that building a startup takes a lot of time and effort, and it is possible for you to also overwork. If you want, you can spend 80 hours, 90 hours, 100 hours a week on your startup. But how do you see this evolving in startup founders?
So I actually think you do need to go through a time where you work a lot. I think that's natural. I think at a certain point you might work a little bit less, but if you start a startup, you need to be ready to do lots of work. I don't think this is going to change much, especially for the early parts. Now, there are cases where you build a business where you can make yourself redundant as founder and the business can run itself and you become an owner instead of your own employee. So that is something you can do. But other than that, you just need to be ready to do a lot of work, honestly. Yeah. And it's not just you. And that's also a thing that we didn't highlight yet in this. If you have, let's say you have a wife and kids and a family, and they want to spend time with you as well, your relationship might be under strain. If you have a relationship with someone and you're starting a business, you need to ask yourself, is this person going to be able to support me or accept me at least when I do this? Or is this going to cause problems? And then you're stuck with some very hard questions for yourself where you have to decide what is the most important for you.
It's a life decision, I think, to start a startup and to make it as successful as possible. And especially if you have this idea, it brings out a lot of energy, but it's also difficult to balance this, and especially indeed with your personal life, and good communication is key in this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then also there might be a way where there might be a path where your family is okay with it and you are supported, but then you can get sick or your spouse can get sick or your children can get sick or something else might happen causing you to have to move or whatever. There's so many things that can go wrong on that end where the founder just simply says, due to personal reasons, I can't do this anymore. It has to stop.
You're also talking becoming an owner instead of a founder. Is that something you would advise to do this as quickly as possible, or this is not the advice?
I would do it when it's ready. Yeah. But I also think if you're a founder of a company, you need to be honest to yourself and ask yourself if you're the founder or if you're going to be able to manage the company and to grow. Now, a lot of founders, you see this a lot when companies grow and get like more investments or when they go public and have an IPO, that the founder is no longer the CEO of the company. And in a lot of cases, that's fine. It hurts your ego as a founder, I think. Like it's probably going to hurt a lot to be demoted in your own company. But if you're honest and you ask yourself, I can start a company, but can I also run a company with thousands of people in there? For a lot of people, the answer to that is going to be no. It's very rare, actually, to find a founder that can do both.
It's also part of lack of focus, I think. If you try to do everything yourself, you run into trouble and burnout. It's unavoidable. And It also comes back to, actually, everything comes back what we've discussed. So if you have the right team, the right talents, you also can delegate that more, so you will be more involved in the more important stuff as a founder, and you have less chance of burnout or stress. So I can also imagine that those are not the only reasons for a startup or a founder to stop the startup. It could also be something like changing business models too quickly. Is that correct?
It could be, but then the question is, does the company fail or does the founder stop it? So it could be that. And it could also be, so when you have problem number 8 that we mentioned, lack of focus. If you're a founder and you're a multi-entrepreneur, you have 5 companies. It might just be that you notice that 5 companies might be too much for you and you scale it down to 3. And then you have to get rid of the other 2, either by stopping the company or hiring a manager to manage it for you. So that it could just be a positive thing where you try to focus more and put your energy into another place.
So I think we've covered all the reasons startups fail. You have anything specific to add?
I think this is a very interesting thing, the reason why startups fail. I hope we can reverse engineer this and figure out that we need to have a product market fit. We need to manage our money. We need to have a business model. We need to do sales, marketing, have the right team. adapt to change. We have to be aware that we're not scaling too quickly, and we have to be focused. And then last of all, we need to take care of ourselves as well as a founder. If you do those well, then it's quite likely that you're going to do well as a company. If this episode was meaningful to you, be sure to follow us for more content about building a business. Thank you for listening to How Startups Grow.